It's football Mondial. Belgium's preparing for France '98. We're behind the scenes at Club Brugge. From Egypt, the penalty specialist with the driving ambition to be the world's #1. And the final meeting on the road to France '98, Iran against Australia. Scenes of joy in Brussels after Belgium secured their passage to next year's World Cup finals in neighbouring France, defeating Ireland in their playoff. It'll be their 5th successive appearance at the sport's greatest event, dating back to 1982. Not a bad achievement for a country whose population numbers just 10 million. For Frankie van der Elst and Eric Deflandre, both part of the successful Belgian team, returning to training with Club Brugge must have seemed a different world. Club Brugge are taking the Eerste Klasse, the Belgian First Division, by storm this season, unbeaten and 5 points clear at the top. At the helm is a familiar face to all connoisseurs of the world game. Eric Gerrits, the former defensive linchpin of the Belgian national team, is taking to management like the proverbial duck to water. Last season produced one of the biggest surprises in Belgian league history, and it's Gerrits who took all the praise. He coached unfashionable Lierse to their first championship since 1960, overshadowing the perennial giants of the Belgian game, Club Brugge, Anderlecht and Standard Liège. Gerrits achieved it on a shoestring budget with no star names and gave the team the chance to meet Europe's finest in the Champions League. The big boys were impressed, and it was inevitable Gerrits would move on.
Obviously, you need a little bit of luck, but they have given me time for 2 years to build a team, and I could take players that I wanted. They let me do my job. The people from the border of Lierse, so I was very happy that they trusted me 100%. Yeah, it was a big family, my team, last season, and that's one of the reasons that we won the championship.
And there's no doubt that Brugge's players have taken to his style of management.
We've got a new coach this year who spends a lot of time with the players. He talks to us, and it makes a big difference. After every game, he tells us if we played well or not, and explains why in each case. This allows us to understand where we're going wrong. And it's also changed the way we're playing this season.
Gerrits took over from Hugo Broos, who'd led the team to the double the previous campaign. Broos stepped down at the end of last season after 6 years in charge. Disenchantment had set in, and the fans had become bored with his management style. This despite the outstanding form of the league's top scorer, Croatian Robert Speha.
Ruimte aan de rechterkant voor Vrijen. Ziet Specher dat? Hij ziet wel dat de schrijver uit zijn doel staat.
Speha is now at Monaco. When he was at Brugge, observers saw it as a one-man team.
I think we depended too much on Speha's goals last season. Now we're playing as more of a team. Everyone has a chance of scoring. Last year, if Robert didn't score, we were in trouble. Now we are much more of a team. And because we change our positions more on the field, our opponents don't always know who to mark. Whereas last season, there was only one, Robert Speha.
Brugge play in the 18,000 capacity Olympiastadion, a modest and unspectacular home they share with city rivals Cercle Brugge, who now languish in the second division after being relegated last season. Belgium and Holland are co-hosting the European Championships in the year 2000, and with Bruges being one of the venues, the stadium's capacity is being increased by 12,000. And if Club Brugge continue as they've started this season, they'll certainly need that additional capacity for their own games as well. Bruges is the capital of Flanders, the Flemish-speaking region of the country. It's a quaint city where the locals go quietly about their daily business. Its picturesque scenery attracts many tourists, and for most of the week, football appears to be the last thing on people's minds. Club Brugge have won the Belgian League Championship 10 times, as well as 7 domestic cups, statistics bettered only by Anderlecht. No European honours, but they're still the only Belgian team to have appeared in the European Cup final, losing to Liverpool in 1978. Already this season, Brugge have been knocked out of the UEFA Cup in the first round by Bochum, then bottom of the German Bundesliga. Belgium's finest, defeated by Germany's cellar dwellers, sums up the current quality of Belgian league football.
It's not so bad as everybody thinks, but it's not so strong as it was some years ago. You have to be honest. It was better some years ago, but okay, we have a lot of new young coaches now in the first division. And, if they give us time to put something better, perhaps in 2-3 years, with a lot of young fellows who are coming now, but they need still 2 or 3 years to get better.
No European success, but the fans realise the team's realistic ambitions are confined to Belgium. What's more, they're particularly satisfied because deadly rivals Anderlecht are in turmoil, 10th in the league, and the subject of a bribe scandal going back to 1984.
It's great. I hate Anderlecht. Anderlecht and Club Brugge are not the best of friends, so them being in trouble, that suits me fine.
Fantastic, it couldn't be better.
I don't care what Anderlecht do. So long as Brugge do well, I don't care what they do.
It's good for us that they're doing badly.
The worse Anderlecht do, the better.
Club Brugge, the Blauw-Zwart or Black and Blues. They've swept everyone aside this year, including their rivals here, Lokeren. They're an impressive mix, 6 regulars in the Belgian national side, and they've some cleverly imported foreigners too. Two Geerts, Verheyen and Claessens, have formed a formidable partnership this year for both club and country. And the two of them will be looking to spearhead the Red Devils next year in France '98. But after a 2-1 home victory over Anderlecht last weekend to keep them 5 points clear with games in hand, it's doubtful the bookies will be taking bets for much longer on Brugge becoming kings of Belgium once again.
They reckon this man has the safest pair of hands in Egypt. His speciality is saving penalties. He's the goalkeeper for Zamalek and the Egyptian national team. His name, Nadir El-Sayed. A year ago, Nadir helped Zamalek to the pinnacle of African soccer. Against Shooting Stars of Nigeria, they won the Champions Cup in front of 80,000 fanatical fans in Cairo. But as their reign as African champions comes to an end, This week, we reflect on a mixed year for the club and its players.
Thank goodness Zamalek have become famous throughout Africa. We've won the African Club Championship a record 4 times. But at the same time, we don't want to gain popularity in Africa at the expense of our popularity in Egypt. Young people always support the winning club, and Zamalek's rivals Al Ahly have now won the Egyptian Championship for the past 4 seasons. Their popularity is now becoming much greater than Zamalek's.
Nadir has been with Zamalek since they won their first African Champions Cup in 1984. Since then, Zamalek have won the Egyptian title just 4 times. Internationally, they may be the most famous club in Africa, but at home they're under increasing pressure. Currently languishing in mid-table in the Egyptian Championship, Zamalek were knocked out of this year's Champions Cup by Ghana's Goldfields. Ruud Krol is the club's 3rd coach in the last 12 months.
Changing the coaching team again just doesn't create stability. The management are the ones that make us feel we can't win. All the big players have gone, and to create a new team you need time, but who knows? Next year, God willing.
But the omens don't look good. The 30-year-old Nadir delayed signing a new contract with Zamalek, just one of a number of players who've been in dispute with the club in the wake of the Champions Cup victory. At the heart of the problem is the fact that in Egyptian football there are no professional players. Tunisia was the first North African country to embrace professionalism earlier this year. Many Egyptian players want their football association to follow that lead.
When players talk about football or money, all the clubs want to talk about is loyalty. Personally, whether or not I have a contract with Zamalek is not important. I want to be a professional player, perhaps in Europe. But above all, my ambition is to achieve something in football.
Nadir is one player Zamalek can't afford to lose. Some of his performances this year have helped save the club from total disaster. In the second round of the Champions Cup against Mufulira Wanderers from Zambia, he was the reason Zamalek qualified for the inaugural African Champions League, thanks to a string of fine saves.
Games in the African Champions Cup don't happen very often, and if we have problems, it's easy to forget about them until after the game, which isn't the case in the league. The attitude of the players is to play for our country rather than for Zamalek.
Nadir is now concentrating on the build-up to the African Nations Cup taking place in February in Burkina Faso. A good performance there by the man thought to be the best keeper in Africa could alert the scouts in Europe. After 13 years at Zamalek, many at the club believe the time is right for Nadir to move on.
It is possible for Nadir, because Nadir plays for a big club like Zamalek, and that's a great help. We have the African Nations Cup coming up in February. Hopefully, after a good period preparing with the national team, Nadir will be at his best during the finals.
Nadir certainly has a big reputation in Africa. He made headlines 4 years ago in the final of the 1993 African Champions Cup. He saved that penalty to win the title for Zamalek after both games against Asante Kotoko had ended goalless. It's exactly the sort of pressure on which he thrives.
Thank goodness pressure's not a thing that bothers me. When I'm in a penalty shootout, I'm not nervous. I have great confidence. That doesn't mean I'm conceited. I'm just confident. I train hard and I concentrate on the player in front of me.
Last year's Champions Cup final also went to penalties, and that save by Nadir gave Zamalek an advantage they didn't relinquish. Once again, Nadir the hero of the Zamalek supporters.
Some people describe our supporters as the 12th man on the pitch. For me, they're the first man on the pitch, the most important. I consider the fans as a mirror. It's important that they're there. If they aren't, I can't see myself. It's important to consider the supporters as the first man and not the 12th.
This is not Nadir's first spell under Ruud Krol as coach. At the last African Nations Cup in South Africa in 1996, Krol was the coach of the Egyptian national team. It was a mixed performance by the Egyptians, and Nadir in particular. An impressive victory over the hosts and eventual winners South Africa was the highlight, but against the Zambians in the quarter-finals, the Egyptians collapsed. Many put the defeat down to the fact that all of the players were fasting during what was the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. Religion is an important way of life for the players.
If we win the match, we thank God. If we lose the match, we also thank God. It's important that we take both punishment and reward, but in the end, we should do our duty, and that means fasting.
For Nadir, the Nations Cup in Burkina Faso could be a make-or-break event. Very few Egyptian players venture out of the familiar surroundings of Cairo and Egypt. It's not an easy move to make in a society that places so much importance on family and religion.
As far as dreams related to football are concerned, there's just one: to become the best goalkeeper in the world. I realize that this won't happen without self-confidence or hard work. My dream is to become a professional. That's what I want to do, God willing.
1997 has been a difficult year for both Nadir and Zamalek. On top of the problems at the club, Egypt failed to qualify for the World Cup. Next year, the Nations Cup promises a fresh start.
With 31 of the 32 teams already assured of a place in the World Cup finals, last week all eyes rested on the remaining tie to be played. Iran, Asia's fourth-place team, versus the top dogs in Oceania, Australia. The first leg took place in the Azadi Stadium in Tehran before an estimated crowd of over 100,000. Harry Kewell's first-half goal for Australia was cancelled out by the Asian Footballer of the Year, Hodadad Azizi. Although the Australians were under heavy pressure in the second half, it finished 1-1. Honours even then, and the battle for the last spot would go down to the wire in Australia.
You have helped us to make a beautiful game for the sport.
That's good, thanks much, and we'll see you next week.
Melbourne was chosen for the game, a match of particular importance to the Australians. Such is the depth of competition in the sports market here that soccer has a daily battle against those sports considered intrinsically more Australian, such as rules football and rugby league. And the fact that it's 23 years since Australia last made it to the World Cup hasn't helped. In such a competitive market, profile is everything. And soccer's highest profile is the World Cup.
It's a very competitive market here. We play 4 big different codes of football: rugby league, rugby union, Aussie rules, and of course the world game of soccer. And in the end, Australians, if you're out there representing Australia to the world, they'll get behind you.
The match will be played at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, the MCG, the cathedral of Australian sport. It hosted the '56 Olympics, regularly pulls in a capacity crowd of 100,000 for the big Australian rules football games, and even holds the world record for a rugby league game between Australia and New Zealand. Soccer was entering the big league. And with Aussie rules and rugby league players enjoying the close season, the sports media descended on Melbourne, or more specifically, they descended on Terry Venables, whose appointment as coach 12 months ago automatically heightened interest in the game.
We've got to concentrate and we've got to get it right because, as I repeat, they are a very good side and technically they're as gifted as much as most teams that I've seen. So we're capable of doing it, but it's no good talking about it. We've got to get it done.
As for Iran, well, they were hoping that it would be third time lucky. They topped the group in the Asian qualifiers and looked on course for an automatic finals berth before failing to win any of their last 3 matches. Then, in a playoff with Japan, they led 2-1 with 15 minutes left and lost. They were boosted by the return from suspension of Karim Bakary, playmaker and the World Cup's top scorer so far.
I have to say that I did have difficulties. It was very difficult to motivate them. But it's not a problem anymore to prepare them because they all know that this is their very last chance. The players know it's their last chance.
It's been a busy 3 weeks for the Iranians, the trip to Johor Bahru in Malaysia for the playoff against Japan and the return to Tehran for the Australia game. However, on the way to Melbourne, any jet lag would be the last thing on their mind if the extra air miles meant they could book a ticket to France.
It's true that we have had a lot of matches, but this is the match that can take us to the World Cup. We'll have to do our best because we've only got 90 minutes left and our only option is to win.
Match day. How many will be tempted to the MCG? A recent survey had suggested that there were potentially 100,000 soccer supporters in Melbourne, so could it pull them in like the other sports?
Cricket, man, that's the game. I love cricket.
Rugby league, you beauty.
There's only one sport that belongs at the MCG, Aussie rules.
Soccer, the MCG, no way.
Oh yes, the MCG, 2 hours before kick-off, they came from all over Australia to cheer on the Socceroos.
Soccer, the way of life.
This one's called Rump Azizi.
The Iranians living in Australia came out in force too, especially the women who wouldn't be able to watch a match back in Iran.
Azizi, 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 Azizi.
And the score?
Australia 2-0. Yeah, Aussies 2-0. 2-1. 3-1. 3-1.
Iran 3-1.
5-2. 3-1. And no one's to Iran. Guess what, man? We're going to the World Cup.
85,000 people turned up at the MCG to watch the match. Add this to the 100,000 in Tehran the previous week, and this two-legged event, surely one of the biggest spectacles ever in the sport. Rather than being overawed by the occasion, the Australians were quickly on the attack. 3 times they went desperately close to scoring in the opening minutes. Then in the 31st minute the deadlock was broken. Harry Kewell, the young Leeds United striker, sending the fans at the MCG wild. 1-0 at half-time, 2-1 on aggregate. Second half, Australia continued to dominate. No surprise when Aurelio Vidmar scored number 2. It was so utterly one-sided the Socceroos could have been forgiven for thinking of France. Within the space of 3 minutes, those thoughts began to crumble. Iran's second noteworthy chance, and Karim Bakary reduced the arrears in the 75th minute. The Australians panicked. Hoded Azizi kept his head to level the score, 2-2. Crucially, the Iranians ahead on the away goals rule. In what must rank as one of the greatest turnarounds in World Cup history, Iran had qualified for the finals for only the second time, ensuring that Asia will have its full complement of 4 teams in France. It was a massive blow for Australian soccer, despite the fantastic spectacle they'd provided.
I congratulate all the Iranians for this win and hope that we'll come out winners in the World Cup as well.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. Really, I haven't witnessed a game like that, I don't think. Everything we wanted to do, we did, except we didn't finish it off.
Australia, the only team to bow out of the World Cup without losing a game. Cruel indeed, but this was Iran's night.
Next week, Dortmund against Cruzeiro, the battle of the giants in the Toyota Cup. See you then.